How do you get to be heard? Are you finding it difficult? Is it
there,
harder than you thought?
And you get out there and you fight for it. I think with reform, these are populists who peddle fantasy economics effectively.
Now the secret's out.
And the secret is out, Beth, and you're the first to have gleaned the secret from me.
I'm currently sat across from the Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride, who I've known for a long time. In fact, you're Sir Mel Stride.
I am, Beth. So a bit of respect,
Sorry
please.
about that, Mel. How would you like me to address you for the rest
I'll tell
of
you
the
what, actually, it's really strange when you first become a sir and the first person uses that terminology. It feels really odd, actually.
Oh, I would make.
But you do get used to it. Don't worry. When you're Dame, Beth,
yeah, you just call.
You'll get used to it very quickly.
Anyway,
yeah,
Sir Mel. I'm not going to call you Sir Mel through this pod. Now, Mel, you haven't been inside the room with decision makers of this government, but bear with me because I thought it would be interesting to bring you the perspective, listeners, of what it's like trying to hold the government to account. And it's been a busy year in opposition for you, Mel. Since the election in 2024, you've gone from being in the cabinet room and now you're in the shadow cabinet. You ran to lead the party. You're shadowing one of the great officers of state. You're on my telly box pretty much all the time. And you only narrowly held on to your seat, but you are still here when many of your colleagues from 2010 did not survive the night of July the 4th and that Labour landslide, loveless as it appears to have been. So we're going to just quickly talk about the year. So look, first for our dysfunctioners who don't know you, but they might recognise you from your responses to Rachel Reeves' big set pieces. Let me just give you a little excerpt of this is Mel responding to the spring statement.
Well, what the British people know, Mr. Speaker, is that this is a consequence of her choices. She is the architect of her own misfortune. How can we trust this Chancellor? She is the Chancellor who said she would not increase borrowing, but she did. She said she wouldn't change her fiscal rules, but she did. She said she wouldn't put up national insurance, but she did. She said she wouldn't cut winter fuel payment, but she did. She said she wouldn't tax farmers, but she did. And she said she would not move to more than one fiscal event a year, and she just has. And now we are all paying the price of her broken promises. Today's numbers confirm it. We are poorer and we are weaker. To govern, Mr. Speaker, is to choose. And this Chancellor has made all the wrong choices.
Is that the worst job in politics? Because you have to respond to a statement you haven't seen and that no one really understands until you actually read the book, read the documentation of what's in the statement, because these statements are kind of political spin, isn't it? And what you need is the numbers. Is it an absolute nightmare?
Yeah, it is a tricky job because, as you say, you don't know what's going to happen. Now, you get that speech probably about 30 minutes before the Chancellor delivers
unredacted,
it.
So it's all there.
Well, no, a lot of it might be redacted, actually, I think, some of it. But it does give you and your team literally 10 or 15 minutes to quickly riffle through it and work out what the main things are. But of course, you can second guess a lot of it. So you kind of know, if the public finances are under strain, you kind of know the arguments that you're broadly going to make. But you do have to be able to think on your feet. And literally, as the Chancellor is delivering her speech, you are thinking about what are the attack lines I'm going to use. Oh, that's interesting. She just said something. I'll pick up on that and amend what you're going to do. So I often don't go in with a tightly typed up speech as such.
Do you feel nervous before you do it?
No.
No?
No.
Oh.
I feel slightly keyed up and ready to go.
A bit of adrenaline?
A little bit. And I just find when I stand up at the dispatch box, I feel really quite settled. I feel like, that's the kind of place that's familiar to me. It may go back to the Oxford Union, which I was president of many, many years ago.
Now the secret's out.
The secret is out, Beth, and you're the first to have gleaned the secret from me.
The thing that strikes me for many of you now on the front bench, of the opposition is that you all came into Parliament and you were already in government. So you were government for 15 years of your parliamentary career. And now you're on the opposition benches. And Kemi Badenoch is in the same situation where she'd only ever been in government. She was in cabinet. You were in cabinet. How awful is it having to move to the opposition benches? Suddenly all the trappings of office, all of the support you have in terms of a Whitehall department working for you, teams of private secretaries doing your work. It's literally you, a couple of people. Is it awful?
No, it's not awful, because we're there for a purpose, and that's to hold the government to account. But it is like guerrilla warfare. And you're right, you suddenly lose all the trappings of government, the civil servant. Somebody once said to me, it's when you get in the back of a car and you sit down and it doesn't go anywhere, that's when you realise you're no longer a minister. Okay, it is that sort of sense of being looked after that disappears.
Yeah.
But look, it's exciting in a sense of working as a smaller team.
Is it,
and
though?
Picking your targets. Yeah, absolutely.
I have to say, it looks a bit miserable, Mel.
Well, I don't find it miserable.
Okay.
I don't find it miserable at all. I tell you what, the big difference is that you notice, apart from the number of people supporting you in the civil service sense, is the fact that when you're in government, you've probably got 350 plus members of your party sitting behind you. And when you stand up at the dispatch box, they roar in your support. When you're down to 120 MPs and some set piece events, there might be only a fraction of those people there. It's much quieter. So what I actually often do is I can be quite provocative of the opposition to get them going. Because then at least you get something to feed off. Sometimes I do that to just get the energy. Get the energy in the chamber.
Because it must be quite a difference going from having 300 plus MPs to like 120. Was there a sort of a bit of a period of mourning for you when you came back to Parliament after the election and a load of your mates had gone? I mean, you must have lost a lot of colleagues that were your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very difficult moment. And you mentioned my election result. I mean, I got in with a majority of 61.
61,
so
still there.
But still here.
A win's a win.
60 more than I needed, actually, Beth, you know. Hey. What was the feeling? I think the overriding feeling was absolutely lost colleagues, which was very, very sad. But secondly, the sense that no longer are you able to pull at the levers of government and make things happen in the way that you could. And of course, the whole reason to be in politics is to effect change.
Under Kemi Badenoch, her style obviously differs quite a lot to Rishi Sunak, who you were really, really close to. I mean, you were a key ally of his and a key person, both in his campaigns and in his government. Under Kemi's leadership, there have been quite a few defections to reform. After the May elections, Farage said to me that he thinks Reform are now the official opposition. They've taken control of 10 councils. Your party, I'm sorry, this is probably not very nice for me to sort of ask you to remember all of this, but your party have lost all 15 councils you were contesting, over 50% of council seats. The Tories finished 4th in overall vote share. Reform would argue that you're on your way out, that the Conservative brand is done. How do you feel about the predicament of the party at the moment, Mel?
So the poll that's going to matter is in 4 years' time. That's a long time.
Yeah, that's true. That's the general election.
One feature of the modern political system, particularly in this country, is its volatility. So, you know, Pierre Poilievre in Canada, for example, was reckoned to be a shoo-in just a couple of months before that election, 23 points ahead in the polls.
He was the Conservative
Not only did he
candidate.
lose the election, he actually lost his seat as well. Albanese, a similar upset over there. If I was sitting there here, heaven forbid, as a socialist, Beth, back in 2019, your question to me would be, Mel Stride, you have suffered the worst defeat for your party since the 1930s. How are you possibly going to get back into office? Well, 5 short years later, the Labour Party got the largest landslide in our history.
And we did ask that.
Everything is possible. And of course, I understand why Reform will make these comments. Of course, why wouldn't they? They want to try and set their position in the polls. A lot will change over the coming months and years. And what we've got to do with Reform is shine a light of truth on them. It's all very well bobbing up and saying you can promise everybody huge tax cuts left, right and centre, but you've got to explain how you're going to pay for those things. And I think ultimately people will see through a lot of the populism that Reform stands for.
Do you talk to Kemi about Farage and Reform, and do you discuss it at Shadow Cabinet and around the table about how to politically manage it?
So I don't get into what we discussed around the cabinet, shadow cabinet table, but of course,
right, you discuss it in the tea room or over
yeah,
a drink.
Of course. I mean, look, we're in a political competition here. It's a multi-party system now, and of course, we have thoughts and ideas on all the competitor parties. But I think with reform, the critical standout things are firstly, these are populists who peddle fantasy economics effectively,
right? Okay.
Where the numbers do not add up. Take everybody out of income tax up to 20,000, costs about 80 billion according to the IFS.
Yeah.
That's getting on for half what we spend on the health service, right? With its 1.3 million employees. So what Nigel Farage and co have got to do is explain where that money is coming from. And it's not enough just to say, we'll cut a bit of waste here, there and everywhere. It does, if the numbers don't add up, then it's not a credible message. And that's what we've got to keep shining a light on. Their manifesto, for example, at the last general election, economically is it's a work of fiction.
I mean,
it's quite dangerous, actually. I think if they'd been elected and put into practice, into effect, the economic side of that manifesto, the economy would have gone into a very bad place.
Mel, this is Andrew. I saw Andrew Jenkins, the Greater Lincolnshire Mayor. Lincolnshire County Council is now run by Reform. This has long been true blue Tory land that has flipped to Reform. And really, if you like, it's a test bed of not a protest party, but actually in government. She said to me...
Ultimately, the big thing is, as a party, we was no longer Conservative.
When you say we were no longer Conservative, can you unpack that for me? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think jumping on the net zero bandwagon, it felt without any scrutiny. It was stuff such as economically, we was high taxes, which is, to me, I'm a fiscally low tax, and the amount of government spending as well.
Right.
And it just felt that they become too centrist. There wasn't much difference between Blairite-type people, the centrists of the Labour Party. And I think that's where the issue was, which lost trust. Personally, I think the Conservative Party's finished. And I think there's an arrogance in the Conservative Party. They think that this is just a blip, but they do not realise the anger of the general public. I don't think they've woke up and smelt the coffee yet of the anger towards them.
Does she have any point in that? Anything you kind of
I
hear and
fundamentally disagree with that analysis.
With all of it?
Pretty much all of it, yeah. I get, we've just talked about my election result, okay? I get how angry the country was with the Conservative Party at the time of the last election. I get that there are lots of things we need to do to earn back trust, and I and Kemi have been speaking about that quite a lot. She's fundamentally wrong on issues like tax and the size of the state. What we are working on is a plan for government that will see lower the tax burden lower, tax policy that is leaning into growth, not away from it, a smaller state. We are the party in office that demonstrated we could cut the welfare budget, and there's a lot more that we can do in that space. And there are all sorts of supply side things and things around skills and getting net migration down as well. So she's completely wrong in her assessment of where the Conservative Party is going, but it doesn't surprise me because we're doing a lot of this work in the background at the moment, and it will take weeks, months, and some of this stuff will take a couple of years.
But in the past week, you've had David Jones, former cabinet minister, has defected to Reform. Jake Berry, former Conservative Party chair, has defected to Reform. How do you feel about that? Does it worry you? Do you just think, God, like...
Well, look, it's for individuals to take their own decisions as to where they feel they belong in the political spectrum and what party's right for them, and that's a decision for them. What I'm focused on is the renewal of the Conservative Party, working with Kemi and my other colleagues.
How do you get a hearing, though? Because at the moment, it seems to me that part of the problem for the Conservative Party is you've got Labour have now got the megaphone of government, which you held for a long time, and you must feel that. You know, like when you're in government, like everything you do, everyone pays attention because you actually wield in the power. And then you're in opposition and you have to do a lot of running to just even get, anything covered. So you've got and then you've got Nigel Farage, who just has this momentum and is taking a lot of bandwidth. So how do you get to be heard? Are you finding it difficult? Is it harder than you thought?
And you get out there and you fight for it, and you hold the government to account. And we have forced significant U-turns. We've had the complete farce of the welfare policy that this government is attempting to put through the Commons recently. We were instrumental in forcing change on the government. We were sent to Parliament not as the governing party, but as the official opposition. And we have to demonstrate that we can carry out that role effectively. That's part of winning back trust.
Let's come to your brief on winning back the trust. Now, I want to talk to you about being the Shadow Chancellor and the Chancellor at the moment, Rachel Reeves. But before I come on to the ins and outs, I have a very important question for you.
Okay.
I'm going to stare at you now for comedic effect.
You are.
No, my question is, I interviewed Rachel Reeves. I went into Number 10 and interviewed her earlier in the year. And somehow we got onto a conversation about her revealing that she goes and makes herself a cheese sandwich in the flat upstairs.
I heard that podcast. I remember that, yeah.
And obviously Kemi doesn't believe in sandwiches. So if you were Chancellor, what would you have for lunch? These are the important questions people want to know.
What would I have for lunch? Every day?
What do you have for lunch?
Well, I tend to eat on the go, so I do tend to have sandwiches.
So you like sandwiches?
I do like a sandwich. No, I've always liked a sandwich, particularly a toasted sandwich.
A toasted?
Yeah, so I can go for the Cadillac, the Rolls Royce of sandwiches. Oh, a ham and cheese.
A ham and cheese.
Do you remember those Breville toasty makers?
I've got one at home.
When I went to university, I had one of those, or whatever the equivalent was, and you could put baked beans in, eggs in, and all sorts of things. And it was fantastic.
That's sophisticated.
So that's what we need to get back to. Is that one up on Rachel?
I don't know. I mean, I've got to be completely inscrutably impartial on this, but cheese sandwich versus a cheese and ham toasty, I have to admit I would go for a toasty.
You would, wouldn't you?
I would. Right, I'm glad we've established the important issues about being in number 11 here. But look, if you were in number 11, it seems to me that your big policy would be to try and to kickstart growth. I mean, it's not dissimilar to what the current Chancellor's trying to do. Yeah. What would be your sort of big move?
One is definitely a focus on taxation. Lower tax economies tend to grow faster, and looking at the balance and trying to simplify taxation and making it lean into growth, cutting the size of the state, but in a way that makes it more productive and more efficient. And getting away from this idea that better public services can only be achieved by tipping ever larger amounts of money into them. We have to win an argument on that. I focus a lot on skills. With AI coming along, we've got to get much more nimble as to what the skills of the future are going to need to look like. We've got to look at higher education, where too many students are going through getting saddled up with debt and not actually having studied a course that's added sufficient economic value to them to actually justify doing it in the first place. Getting on top of welfare, getting things built, getting roads built and rail, and getting energy costs down, all of those things to drive growth. Yeah.
Do you have some sympathy for the government, though, in that, I mean, you've got a Trump in the White House, the government have had to put loads more money into defence spending, which is presumably something you would agree with. And the spending envelope is really tight. They're still dealing with the long tail of COVID, which, again, when you were in government under fire for the state of the economy and public finances and tax at a record level under a Conservative government, you were talking about the long tail of COVID. Do you have some sympathy with the government about the situation that they find themselves in, that you would have inherited as well had you won the election?
So look, all governments face headwinds of one form or another. The art is to create an economy that is resilient and growing strongly enough to face into those headwinds. It is not the case that the predicament that the economy is in at the moment is solely because of things that are external to the decisions the government made. And I'll give you three of them. One was a blunderous tax move when they first got into office, loading up taxes on businesses, which destroyed growth. And they talked down the economy as well.
And this was the employers' national insurance
tax.
Absolutely,
25 billion. Absolutely.
Of which the money was put into the National Health Service to try and drive down waiting lists.
Right. Well, I would say that the net consequence of that and other things was actually to
And
destroy
also-
growth,
right,
which is
okay.
the way that you actually fund public services. The best way of funding public services is having a growing economy. The second thing is productivity. So they gave 14% to the train drivers, 22% to the junior doctors.
And they
no
would
productivity.
say, and they would say that was to settle strikes that
Yeah,
were
well, look
crippling
what's
public
happened.
services,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
why
when's
the
treating-
former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak
Absolutely.
couldn't cut waiting lists.
So
right?
yeah, so yes, but let's deal with that. So Wes Streeting said before the last general election, all the Tories need to do is get around the table and settle, and then we can all get back to business as usual. Well, look what happened. He did exactly that, and he's now got more strikes coming down the line.
Potentially he has.
Absolutely. So productivity alongside gains alongside wage increases involved. And the third thing is welfare, Beth. Unless you really get on top of the welfare budget, which is spiralling ever upwards, then it's very difficult to have a truly, economy that's growing at the rate that it really should be. Now, the government made the wrong choices on those three things, and we are now paying the price.
I've heard you make that argument, and actually, if you look at employment levels and you look at some of the sort of fallout of that, a lot of businesses would agree with your argument that actually there was a knock-on effect of those big tax rises on business back in October last year. But your problem, isn't it, is that you're still so tarnished. The Conservatives are so tarnished by the Liz Truss era, the 2022 mini budget. You've actually been someone that has come out and said it can't happen again. At the time you were the Treasury Select Committee chair, you tried to hold Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, the then Chancellor, to account. Personally, you might be in the clear. And actually, there was another gentleman that was loudly saying that these were bad ideas, and that was the former Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. He was also opposed to some of the things that they were trying to do. But the problem is, why should listeners, they'll be listening to you make arguments on this pod about the economy, and they might be feeling quite frustrated because they'll be like, well, why am I going to listen to these guys? Because look at what they did to the economy. How difficult is it to repair the trust? Do you acknowledge it's still a problem, and is it a difficult journey still?
So in terms of what we did to the economy, I think there are many really strong things that we did with the economy, actually, in terms of growing jobs and growing the economy and so on and so forth. But I gave a speech to the Royal Society, and what I said at the Royal Society was it was clearly a major error on the part of my party at that particular moment in time. And what I also said was that as a party, we will never, ever do anything like that ever again. We will have fiscal responsibility right at the core, right in the DNA of the Conservative Party. That's how I've lived my political life, and that's never changed. I said it at the time that it happened in those terms. And that reassurance should be loud and clear for people that under certainly my stewardship within this party.
Do you think it's going to take time? Still take time?
These things always do take time, of course they do, getting that reconnection with the electorate and so on. But I think through time, through our actions, through, for example, facing that issue head on in the way that I did in that, I think, quite important speech, is all part of making it very clear what the party stands for. Now, for the vast majority of the time that the Conservatives have been in office, we have stood for fiscal prudence. We have stood for fiscal responsibility, and we stand for that again.
Yeah, and then it was all blown up by Liz Truss, and you're kind of you're still picking up the pieces of all of that.
I think we're moving on. And what we will now be talking about going forward will be much more about how we get a growing economy, higher productivity, tackling some of the real fundamental problems and challenges that we have. That will require deep thinking and lots of hard yards and putting together policy and so on. But we will do that, and we will be ready for the next general election with the right plan for our country.
I'm going to have to let you go, but my colleague on this pod, Ruth Davidson, who you will know, she keeps saying to me that she doesn't think that Kemi Badenoch will necessarily be the leader going into the next general election, that she is not really connecting with the public. She's not, the polls are still terrible. I mean, do you think Kemi will be running you into the next general election? And what do you say to those Conservatives that think maybe it's time to change the leader again?
So the answer to your question, will she lead us into the next election, is yes, absolutely. Go back to Margaret Thatcher. When she became leader in 75, people criticised the way she looked, the way she spoke. She was rubbish at the dispatch box, apparently, and so on and so forth. She took time, in fact, to become that rounded, formidable political force that she finally became. I think Kemi is already in a very strong position. And one of the qualities that people don't focus enough on is her resilience. Okay, you talk about all sorts of different things. She's incredibly resilient. This is the toughest job in British politics. She has to think about everything from donors to the party, to reorganising CCHQ, to prepping up for PMQs, to policy development, to being seen up and down the country out doing visits. It is an extraordinary job. And she is the person to lead us forward. She knows what her political principles are. She knows what her political lodestar is. She's doing the hard yards, that mature work that we need to do to get us into a position where we can get back into political contention. And she's very resilient too. So I'm very confident that she will lead us going forward.
I don't think she's making the argument enough, though, compared with the way I would compare how Keir Starmer was as leader of the opposition to the way that Kemi takes leader of the opposition. Starmer was out all the time, doing interviews all the time, trying to get the megaphone all the time. And Kemi, I think, still has an approach of almost like a mindset of still being a government minister where, she just pops up and when she speaks, everyone looks up. And it's just not like that in opposition, is it?
I think, though, I actually think Kemi is out quite a lot actually on the media now, and I think it's all very well to say Keir Starmer was out sort of popping up here.
Well, I know it because I covered it.
Yes, and
I was doing it.
I'm not saying I dispute it, but I'm saying it's all very well to observe that. But the reality is, what he wasn't doing was coming up with a clear plan for the future of our country, and that's why.
I don't know. I mean,
that's why we've seen the last year of chaos and U-turns.
Is there anything that the Labour government have done in the last year that you've thought, yeah, I support that, or I like what you did there? The defence
I think the continued support for Ukraine has been really important. I think that has emerged as a clear bipartisan position that both parties have had, in fact, including in the last government. And I think that's very important. And a further commitment to defence, I think, is important going forward.
Okay, so you've given him one win. Well, how would you rate them out of 10, the government?
Can I have a negative score, or is that being...
No.
No.
Well, no, you can do what you want.
Oh, all right. All right.
I'm not going to tell you how to answer.
Okay, well, probably -10, something like that, I would think.
And what about the Conservative Party?
I'll leave that for your listeners to judge.
Reform? They've had quite a good
They've
year.
done very well out of occupying a vacuum in which they haven't been entirely scrutinised in the way that they will going forward.
Which
they have.
Yes,
filled
indeed. Because somehow
indeed,
the official opposition...
Yes, the last government, when we were in office, we lost very heavily. This government is messing things up left, right and centre, and reform are none of the above.
They're now in the vacuum. But you need to get in the vacuum, don't you?
Well, that vacuum will shrink.
But you need to try and take the vacuum back.
Are we talking vacuum cleaners?
You need to suck the vacuum back into the Conservative Party's
No, we need to bring reform out into the light of truth. That's what we need to do, Beth.
And just one other thing, and I know you're going to kill me because you have to leave. Can you ever see a tie-up between Reform and the Conservatives? No, never.
Look. And one of the principal reasons is, why would a party that I've just spoken about fiscal responsibility again?
Yes.
Why would a party that stands for fiscal responsibility want to get involved with a party that deals in fantasy economics? It does not add up. Okay. If a reformer in government, I would be fearful for the economy in our country. So I wouldn't want to have anything.
Well, Mel Stride, on that note, I would like to carry on, but someone's going to... Well,
I'm probably late already.
I'm going to get cancelled. No, you're not. You've got 10 minutes. How quickly can you walk?
Pretty quickly.
Right, you leave this room. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was great, Mel. I really enjoyed that. Thanks.